David Samson, former MLB executive and host of the Nothing Personal podcast, joins us bright and early. How's it going, David?
I am doing well. Good morning. I'm ready for lunch, actually.
Oh, wow. It's just nothing for you, eh?
It's like the Mark Wahlberg training schedule.
I am training for a 48-hour race, but no, I do Nothing Personal live at 8 a.m., so I am up preparing this time every day.
What is this? What is this 48-hour race? Please explain, and why are you doing this? It sounds like there's probably a good reason.
Yeah, I'm raising money to try to cure Parkinson's. My best friend has Parkinson's, and he really needs a cure. And we do an epic event every year. One year we ran 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. And This year we're going to run 4 hours. Every 4 hours we're going to do about 7K for 48 straight hours.
That is incredible. We're just sitting here staring at each other with our jaws dropped because the 7 continents, just the travel alone, that one. But this seems absolutely incredible. Is there a way that we can help, in terms of support? Is there something the listeners can go and help with donations or to help support you?
That is very nice. We're raising money with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and on my Twitter, David P. Samson, and Instagram, David P. Samson. There's links and posts and all sorts of things. So, yes, any support is welcomed because Parkinson's stinks. Yeah. But we do things to try to help people. And even if it can't help my best friend, maybe it can help someone who doesn't even have it yet.
100%. We'll make sure we share that. And best of luck on that. And continue training hard. And we appreciate you coming on early to kickstart what is your afternoon. Let's talk about José Bautista. So a very important weekend here in the city of Toronto. Someone that means a lot to a lot of generations in terms of his Jays memories. When you think of José Bautista, what comes to mind for you?
So everyone is going to say that bat flip, but I'm not actually. When I think about José Bautista, I think about him as running a team and looking at him in the lineup when we're playing against him and saying to ourselves, he will not beat us today. No matter what happens, we will not let him. He didn't rise to the Barry Bonds category where we would have meetings before playing the Giants and say, we will walk him with the bases loaded. It wasn't that. It was a different type of professional hitter that Bautista was. Professional in the clubhouse. He was a player who was always on our wants to acquire list, which is a list we kept with the GM and the president of baseball operations of players around the league who, if ever became available, they were going to be on our radar. And Bautista was always one of those players. So you guys were very lucky to have him, watch him, enjoy him. And it's great that he did what he did, coming back and retiring as a J.
Yeah, we were, the last couple of days we've been doing the legacy piece and talking about the impact Bautista had. And I think with that and with what he provided, it's sort of like a permanence that he changed this organization for the better, legitimized it in many ways. And that's more proof of it. And obviously a great perspective. I want to get to Wander Franco because obviously, the news was out there yesterday, but thought, we should have someone a little bit more in the weeds on this to make sure that we're covering our bases here. What do we know about the Wander Franco situation? I know there was some more information overnight, and how has Major League Baseball and the Tampa Bay Rays responded to the news, the speculation, the allegations?
So when something like this happens, the first thing that you do as a team when you discover it is you alert Major League Baseball, because Major League Baseball is going to take over any sort of investigation. You don't do this as a team. It's not the Rays who are trying to figure out what happened in the Dominican at all. It's baseball who does it. And then you work with baseball and the union to figure out what you're going to do during the course of the investigation. Once you say you're going to have one, which obviously baseball has done in this case. And so when Franco was put on the restricted list, it's important to note that means he's not getting paid. He's not getting service time. And that's different than the list Trevor Bauer was on during MLB's investigation of Trevor Bauer. He was on what's called the administrative list. That's a list where you do get paid and you do get service time while you're being investigated. So restricted list, he's not going to stay there for 6 months or a year. This is a very quick pit stop before there is some sort of completion of the investigation or acknowledgement that it's going to take much longer, but we don't have enough evidence to say what we're going to do with him in terms of a suspension. So you'd move him over to the administrative list where he would get paid. And the reason why you do that is you want to make sure that you are doing right by the player who's been accused of something, whatever the case may be, but has not been proven either in a court of law or by Major League Baseball. So the Rays are in a position where they just don't know. They put a timeline on it saying this road trip, we're going to have this figured out by the end of this road trip, which ends, next week. But that's not necessarily accurate. They have to do something at the end of the road trip with Franco, but it doesn't mean that Major League Baseball will be ready to close the case either with a punishment or with a, hey, there's nothing to see here.
Is there a precedent or is there an example that maybe this would follow if worst case scenario, the investigation shows that this has, been a factual allegation? Is there a way that they terminate his deal? What happens to a contract in terms of a player's situation with that? Not that that's the most important thing, but it is a question in terms of how the Rays would move forward if Wander Franco was found guilty of these allegations.
The precedent is, and I want to go back to Bauer, and these are two totally different issues, no question, but they fall under the same part of the collective bargaining agreement, which is the policy that was negotiated for domestic violence, sexual assault, and what baseball would say, if they suspend Franco, that doesn't mean Tampa Bay can terminate his contract. What it does mean is they could do what the Dodgers did to Bauer. They could just release him, but if you release him, that means you're paying the balance of his contract. So if you're asking whether or not Tampa can get out of the $182 million contract, I don't see a situation under which he can. If he gets convicted of a felony, there is language that would allow for a termination for cause, but being suspended under the policy where baseball will end up suspending him if they do, that is not eligible for termination for cause. So a termination without cause is what we call in baseball releasing a player, where if you have your contract, you still get paid.
So how does this impact the Rays? I mean, like Wander Franco's been, the important context is he's like the one guy who's been paid by the Tampa Bay Rays. He's the one guy who seems like he's making money, the one guy they wanted to invest in long term. And, you don't want to trivialize the issue here, but he was problematic before then. He was having issues before then, or he was having issues during the balance of the season. And it feels like it would be something that would infect and affect that clubhouse. I'm like, if one player, especially on a team like the Rays, is, acting up and it's the one guy who's been paid, is there like resentment there? Like, what do you expect to happen internally with the Rays, given that it's not so certain what the future may be and it might not be that easy to get out of this contract?
Listen, there's no question that the clubhouse is aware of which players have been paid and which players haven't. And you've got dynamics that go on when you have pending free agents or young players who have not gotten guaranteed money, and they're living with young players who have, or veterans who have, and there's jealousy, there's resentment. But in terms of behavior, there's two types of things inside a clubhouse. There's players who are not liked. That is very common, and teams can get through that. And then there are players who are what we call turds. And I don't know if I can say that on the show, but what that means, it's a player who, forget the fact that you don't like him, he's actually hurting the team. You can't work with him. He is hurting the performance of the team. And it's up to the front office and the manager to decide and to figure out which player is which, because a player who is not liked, you can survive that. A player who is a turd, you can sometimes not survive it. If you have multiple players like that, it can take your team all the way down. So I've not lived with Franco, so I can't tell you which category he's in, from beloved to liked to not liked to potentially bringing down the team. In terms of the jealousy over money, Tampa's a smart front office, and the players know that. They love playing in Tampa because young players get a chance to be in the big leagues. So they love being in that organization. They love having a chance where they could get paid, and they love winning. And Tampa does all those things. So I don't believe that his contract in any way caused a problem, and I don't believe that his behavior, which was noted by the manager earlier this season when they sat him. I don't know if you remember, but they sat him
Yeah.
And they said he's not being professional. He needs to grow up, basically. That sort of stuff happens every day in a clubhouse, and that did not draw my attention. If he's suspended for a long period of time, if he did what the allegation is saying he did, I would have a hard time keeping that player on my team, and I would have to speak to the owner because I know we have a big investment in him, but I'm not sure that that is something that I would want from our fan base, especially when they're trying to get public money for a new stadium.
We're chatting with David Samson of the Nothing Personal podcast. It's mostly baseball content on the podcast, but you dove into the James Harden situation yesterday on tour in China for Adidas. He basically, he shot his shot in a lot of ways. He went right after Daryl Morey, calling him a liar, saying he'd never work with him in a professional sense. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, ever again. What did you make of that situation? Was it Harden playing his last card? Was it sort of a desperate ploy, or was it in some ways brilliant because this is a guy who wants to leave Philadelphia, and if you put it all out there, chances are you might get your wish, or you have a better chance at getting your wish?
So we cover all sports and business on Nothing Personal, and when I saw this story, I thought it was a fine story that Harden wanted to trade and that Daryl Morey said, no, we're not going to trade him. And then I woke up and saw the video of James Harden in China, no less, saying that Daryl Morey's a liar. Daryl Morey I would never work with him. And I couldn't believe that Harden did that. This is a level of player empowerment in the NBA that has to make Commissioner Adam Silver squeamish because it's so blatant and so horrible. As an executive, I would make James Harden sit in Philadelphia. If he doesn't want to play, no problem. You don't get paid. If you want to ruin our team, then come on aboard, ruin our team. But I am drawing a line in the sand. I am not letting players take over the league. On the other hand, if I'm the owner of the Sixers, I don't want to waste a year of Joel Embiid again. I don't want to waste another year as I'm getting older with our team not winning a championship. And I'm going to tip my hat to James Harden for putting me in checkmate. And I'm going to trade him wherever I can to get rid of him and assume it's addition by subtraction. So there's a lot of conversations that are going on between Daryl Morey and Josh Harris, who's also the new owner of the Commanders, as they figure out whether or not they should negotiate with, he's not a real terrorist, but that's the expression. Do you negotiate with players who do what James Harden did?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Embiid because I saw this morning he removed Philadelphia from his Twitter location, and I think we spent a lot of focus on Harden, but Embiid is certainly a part of this and what he's feeling and what he's thinking. And then, of course, newest head coach Nick Nurse, who we know really well here in Toronto. There's lots to unpack with that. We'll chat longer on our show a little bit later on the Harden situation for our listeners. I want to ask you about the Yankees, though, because if we're talking about GMs and ownership that might be in hot water, is the Yankees situation something that might be untenable at this point? Is there a reset or a retool needed with the GM? I believe Cashman's 26 or 7 years with the Yankees. Like, is it time that maybe the end of an era we are seeing with how the Yankees have performed this season?
It's funny. Hal Steinbrenner tries so hard not to be George, his dad. If George were alive, Brian would clearly not be the GM anymore because George wouldn't tolerate what's happening and what's happened over the last couple of years. But Hal is much more calm, and he looks at this team and recognizes that there's been underperformance. He recognizes the amount of money he spent. The only problem I have with the Yankees this year is they re-signed Aaron Judge, and they thought that that was getting better. Well, you're just keeping your player from last year. You're just paying him more, and it's a guarantee he wouldn't have the same type of record-breaking season again. So you're going to get worse performance. Then you spend a ton of – excuse me. Sorry about that. Then you spend a ton of money on a pitcher, Rodon, who has a terrible injury history, but you give him a ton of years and a ton of money trying to get an ace behind Garrett Cole. So I think there's been a breakdown in scouting, a breakdown with the GM, but mostly a breakdown with the fact that they have so much money that they spend in payroll that they just are allowed to sign all of the best players in theory, and then it doesn't work. So I think that they do have to change what they do. It's harder to be disciplined when you have a payroll like they have, But clearly, changes need to be made. I don't know how Boone and Cashman can survive a last-place finish, but we're going to find out soon enough because I think they will finish in last place.
I'm not sure how much it's helping Yankee optics, but if there's one thing working in their favor is there are a lot of expensive failures around Major League Baseball this year. The New York Mets, obviously, chief among them, maybe the biggest one. But the same thing happening in San Diego, and Juan Soto voicing his frustration recently, calling out the team. I think he's got 1 year left on his deal before he can reach free agency. What do you expect to happen with San Diego? Like, it just seems like it's another uphill battle they can't climb, and they've got a guy who is still young and still worth so much, who's voicing his frustration at this moment. Do you expect anything drastic from San Diego in the near future? Anything drastic with Soto in the near future?
They better. Can you imagine how upset the players' union is that the top 3 payrolls may all make the playoffs, and the Orioles, the Marlins may make the playoffs, and the Rays? Owners look at that and say, why would I spend $250 million? I need smarter people. I can make the playoffs at $80 million or $100 million. And that's very upsetting to the union and very, very happy dance time for the commissioner of baseball. But if you are the Padres and you're the owner, you're losing a ton of money. You've got to get Soto out of there. That team isn't working how it's made up. And you've got all those players signed to long-term deals. Bogarts, Machado, Tatis. You can't sign Soto. You might as well get rid of him because it's not working with him. And you have to tell your GM either you're fired, or if there's a reason they bring him back, which would be shocking to me because there's been failure after failure with San Diego and money after money spent. But if you bring him back, you have to say, listen, we got to be smarter because our payrolls are way too high and we can't even win 81 games. And I'm familiar with that. We had payrolls that were uncomfortably high, smaller than San Diego's. And when you don't win 81 games and your owner's losing money, you don't like going into work and facing the owner. And that's got to be the situation right now in San Diego.
Last one for you, David. The Kevin Brown situation, I guess, of yesterweek was an interesting one, I guess, for media types specifically. Maybe not so much for the average fan, but certainly those in Baltimore. Is this like predictable, unpredictable of the Orioles themselves? What did you make of the whole situation? And I guess most recently, his return and his statement upon returning.
Well, I was worried he had been taken hostage when that statement was made. And if not that, then I was congratulating him because he must have gotten an extension. His contract runs out. We're talking about the play-by-play broadcaster for the Orioles who was suspended for saying something so innocuous on the air that the most sensitive owner would not react to it. But the Angelos brothers are a different group. They fight with themselves. They fight with Major League Baseball. They fight with the Washington Nationals. And they're very sensitive and thin-skinned. And if they suspended Kevin Brown for something different, then they should have leaked why they suspended him. Even if it were private, even if it were a private family matter, I would have leaked it. It sounds terrible, but I would have leaked it because there was such bad press about me, pretending I owned the Orioles, that I would want to get the light away from me. But nothing ever came out, which means either the Orioles are the nicest people in the world covering up something that happened with Kevin, or they're the thinnest-skinned people in the world. And I'm going to go with the latter. And so they bring him back, and then he releases this statement that was ridiculous. Every word of it was ridiculous. It was pandering to the owner practically, and he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. So my prediction, and I said this on Nothing Personal, I think yesterday, my prediction is that he got a new deal during this period, and part of the new deal was a lot of money, a lot of years, and that he had to release a statement saying, I love you, John Angelos.
Yeah, quite the silly situation. It was great to see all the Orioles fans with like free Kevin Brown signs. Like it really blew up across all teams in MLB. It seemed like. David, appreciate you jumping on, running the gauntlet with us this morning. Best of luck with your training, September 22nd, 24th. I'll retweet your sharing the link for everything for your race and helping find a cure for Parkinson's. We appreciate you coming on this morning, and best of luck.
And I appreciate speaking to you. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Well.